up, everybody? We're back. Corey Hughes, Bloody History. So we started on this Dallas Witnesses thing, and I got a lot more to go through with that, but I happened to discover a file that I want to cover because it's something we've never talked about really, and it came from a source that I really need to explore a whole lot more, and that's the collection of John Armstrong. The collection of John Armstrong has well over 100,000 pages of documents. It's an incredible collection, and I'm just starting to scratch the surface of it. So I love going through these varied collections of the different researchers over the years because it's, really interesting to see what they actually were able to pull together on their own, and everyone's got slightly different stuff, which is great. This first document here is an example. This obviously is a letter. It says at top, Bancroft, Dulles, Luce, and Paine. Bruce Campbell Adamson's research on the subject is extensive and very useful too. Olga Femmer worked side by side with Zapruder and Jean Lagon de Mornschild. Olga's daughter is Marie Femmer, who was LBJ's personal secretary, while she, Marie, was in the ploy of the Central Intelligence Agency under Dulles. So Marie Femmer worked for the CIA. Dulles ends up on the Warren Commission, and Olga's close friend and co-worker Jean Lagon married a CIA contract agent, George de Mornschild, who was not only the man who befriended JFK's accused assassin Oswald, but belonged to a CIA proprietary front organization with the man who would film the assassination, Abraham Zapruder. So not only did Olga know and associate with Zapruder, so did de Mornschild, who became Oswald's best friend. De Mornschild's future with wife Jeannie Lagon actually introduced Oswald's to Ruth Hyde Paine, who was indirectly responsible for getting Oswald his job at the Texas School Book Depository. Additionally, Michael Paine married the woman Ruth Hyde Paine, who shared the same first and last name as his own mother, Ruth Forbes Paine. When she, his mother, remarried, it was to a man who had, along with LBJ's personal pilot, Arthur Moshman, co-founded Bell Helicopter. Bell was a firm contracted by the USG, which LBJ owned a substantial percentage in. The exact percentage escapes me at the moment, and would thus profit from the escalation of a war in Vietnam. And he did. In fact, so profit upon the death of JFK. LBJ is having reversed JFK's withdrawal policy from Vietnam by signing NSAM 273 a mere 4 days after the president was dead, on the 26th of November, 1 day after the funeral, virtually assured that profit. Furthermore, Ruth Forbes Paine, very close friend, was a CIA agent, Mary Bancroft. Mary Bancroft was involved in an extramarital affair with Alan Dulles for 20 years. She was also involved with Henry Luce of Life magazine, Luce, I don't know how to pronounce that, Luca or Lusa, probably Luke, of Life magazine simultaneously. Of course, we know LBJ appointed Alan Dulles to the Warren Commission, and Luke's Life magazine damaged the Zapruder film and reversed the order of some of the Zapruder frames to conform to the official fairy tale by accommodating the lie of the single bullet theory. Dulles was the commissioner who questioned the Paines. He did not, however, disclose to the commission, nor did he ask any questions of Michael or Ruth Paine that would connect him to Michael's mother, Ruth. That he and they withheld information concerning the fact that he was well acquainted with one or more of the witnesses and was in a significant relationship with a member of that witness's immediate family is just one more smoking gun. Next page, subject station wagon, date June 24th. This is an email. John, I checked out several sources about Ruth Paine's station wagon. In addition to the testimony of Ruth Paine and Cliff Chastain, here are the ones that might help. Testimony of Michael Paine, Warren Commission, Volume 9, page 454. Testimony of Lena Garner, Warren Commission, Volume 10, page 266. Testimony of Eric Rogers, Warren Commission, Volume 11, page 462. Good to talk to you. Glad you're feeling better. Let me know if I can help. Bill. All right, now we have a couple pages here extracted from Warren Commission testimony. Let's see what the relevance is. It's between Mrs. Garner who's obviously Lena Garner, page 10, number 266. There are some things underlined here. So the conversation is between Mrs. Garner and Mr. Liebler. She's asked a question, and this is her response, beginning with Mrs. Garner. No, she never said her name, and I didn't ask her, but I know she was a middle-aged woman in about her middle 50s or late 50s, well-kept reddish hair looking with a ball in the back, and she wore glasses, a well-kept woman. Liebler asks, did they say specifically they had stopped at your place because they had seen the sign advertising the apartment for rent? Yes, the sign, yes. She took him riding and seen the sign out. Do you remember any other conversation with either Oswald or this lady that first time you met Oswald? No, that is about all, because then they left. Did Oswald move back to the apartment or move into the apartment before his wife came, or did they come together and move in together? No, he was in there a couple days before she came. Do you remember exactly when he moved in? Did he come back later on the 9th, or did he come on the 10th? The next day, the next evening. The next day. He moved in the next day. The next evening. That would have been Friday the 10th? I don't know if he stayed there, but he was there. Did he move some of his belongings in? Is that correct? Yes. Did you notice anything about his belongings? What kind of stuff he had? I didn't see that. I didn't see anything of that. Did you see any suitcases he might have had? No. Do you remember when his wife came? That weekend, on that Sunday. That was a Sunday. How did she arrive? In this station wagon with that lady from Texas. That it had a Texas license, blue and tan station wagon, or it was a blue and white station wagon or something like that. And she also stayed a few days. And then when she brought the wife in, she stayed at least a week. This was a woman from Texas. Yes. Whom you later learned was named Ruth Paine, Mrs. Paine. Is that correct? Right. Now, did you notice how many people there were in the station wagon when it arrived? No, I really didn't. Did you notice how many? In fact, I didn't see the station wagon when it arrived. I didn't see it until the next day. I saw it parked out there with the Texas license and figured, she had come in, his wife, because that's where he told me she was coming from, Texas. So here we must be talking about one of the earlier moves of Oswald, right? So I don't know if I discussed this. No, I haven't discussed this. Shit, I totally forgot. Completely irrelevant to what we're talking about today. So as I'm going through John Armstrong's website, because I'm revisiting John Armstrong very heavily, because we need to get to the bottom of this duplicate Oswald thing prior to 1959. Goddamn fucking must, okay? We know that starting in mid-1960 and onward, we can link in numerous people to the impersonation of Oswald, primarily Kerry Thornley, William Seymour, but also there's a couple others. I'm sure there was Larry Crawford at the Texas Employment Commission, and I'm sure that there were a couple others that were very minor and incidental that never made it even to my attention, who were other people who might have looked like Oswald, including even Michael Paine, right? I'm trying to find evidence of Oswald having lived elsewhere during the time. So here, what he was trying to point out in this testimony is the fact that in 62, I believe at a time when Ruth Paine was not supposed to be in the picture yet, she was in the picture, right? So we have a lot of these things that pop up in the assassination. People entering the picture at times when they're not supposed to, right? Or at a time, and then it's determined that they're known from before. But here we have interactions with Ruth Paine in Texas, where she drives Marina back to Dallas at a time when they're not supposed to be interacting. So, let me see if I can skip the rest of this. I will skip on to the next one, the Mr. Paine testimony, and it says, it just starts off midway through the testimony. Have you used my automobile very well, because I don't believe he knew where my second key was, and I would always have the key. Mr. Liebler then says, what kind of an automobile do you own? Mr. Paine says, this is Michael Paine, it is a French Citroën. What model? Paine says 59. Liebler asks, not a 2CV? No, it's an ID-19, I guess. Liebler asks, is that the only automobile that you own? While they were here, I bought a second automobile, an Olds, a 55 or a 56 Oldsmobile, a 56, I believe it was. When was this? During the time, sometime between September and November 1st, I bought a secondhand 56 Oldsmobile. For your own use? Yes. So you had two cars? Yes. And Ruth has a station wagon, doesn't she? Yes. And that's her own car? Yes. Is that the only automobile that she owns? Yes. What model is that? It's a 55. Is that a Chevrolet station wagon? Yes. Do you know whether Oswald used that? Mr. Paine says, Ruth took Oswald to practice driving in a parking lot. Did she tell you about that? Yes. What did she tell you? I can't remember whether she has told me so much more since November 22nd, and I can't remember whether she may have said before that, but she was telling me how he was persistent, diligent in trying to learn, not very particularly skilled, and apparently quite pleased at the whole process. He was grateful to her and one of the nicest kinds of communication she had with him. Did she say anything about his ability to drive a car? She thought it was pretty crude. He was having trouble operating the clutch and over-controlling the stick or the steering wheel. Those are my words. She didn't use over-controlling, but put in some other way. So let me pause right here. So this incident here where Oswald, the person that we know as Oswald, drove a car, this is the only incident that we're ever aware of ever in his life that he drove a car. She took him to a parking lot and they practiced, and as far as I know, this only happened one time. He might clarify that and correct that if I'm wrong, but I believe this only happened one time. And so all the different eyewitnesses who claim to have seen Oswald driving a car, it's completely not Oswald. It's totally mistaken. And all those times, the person driving was driving somewhat experienced-like and recklessly. So to me, it was always obvious that if you saw Oswald in a car, it wasn't Oswald. Particularly the incidents that involved Marina at Furniture Mart and down at McGee's Barber Shop and at Reeves Morgan's house, and then it will be the same Oswald at the voter registration incident in Clinton, which was all connected to the barber shop and Reeves Morgan and Jackson State Hospital. So that I cover pretty extensively in my book to clarify that situation. Because a lot of people like to think that the Clinton voter registration incident is proof that Oswald was hanging out with these people. And no. It wasn't him at all. It was Kerry Thornley. So, all right. Do I need to read any more of this? No, this is here. He's just confirming that Oswald got lessons from Ruth Paine. That's the purpose of this testimony here. Next, we have testimony from Mr. Rogers. Who was Mr. Rogers again? Let me see if it says. Eric Rogers, Warrant Commission, Volume 11, page 462. I don't know what the relevance is, but let's find out. Liebler says, so it would have been possible for him to have sat in that porch and you couldn't see him very well from the street. Rogers says he wouldn't discuss anything on the porch. He would go in the house. We don't know who he's talking about yet. Liebler then asks, would it have been possible to sit in that porch and drop the blinds so that people couldn't see you? It could be possible. I don't know. I seen him sitting down there and go in and out, coming in and out. We talked to you previously out at the apartment, and my recollection is that you told us that sometime in September, I believe, that a station wagon came and picked up Mrs. Oswald. That was the time he left town. Tell us about that. The station wagon was visible. I called my wife. I said, well, he must be leaving. They were packing all the things, probably left the next night or sometime, like I told you, the following night after. Had the two things in his hand and goggles on like he was running out of there. I don't know what he was doing. Tell us about those goggles. Were they something like sunglasses? Describe them. I don't know. I couldn't say. Did you see what license plates the station wagon had on it? No, Mr. Liebler, I couldn't tell you that. Kind of gray station wagon. He was putting the packing, everything in that himself. Do you know when the station wagon left? Well, I told my wife. She said she might have left early in the morning before we got up with the lady. You think that she might have left with the lady? Yes. Then he left that night or late afternoon, went out in a hurry, left all the lights on. Who was in the station wagon? Was there another lady? Yes. Did you see the station wagon leave? We didn't see it leave, but it was there when he left. There was nobody else, evidently. Did you see Oswald at all after the station wagon left? No, I didn't see him until that night. He slipped out of there. He was going to catch the bus across the street. The bus stop is right across the street from us. Did you see Oswald come out of the apartment in the evening? Yes. Was he sitting on the porch at that time? So it was clear to you that Oswald did not leave with the ladies in the station wagon. No, he didn't leave with them in the station wagon. It was the following evening he left on the bus with these 2 handbags. That was in the evening, yes. He ran across the street and got on the bus. That's right. Did he get on the bus at the bus stop? The bus stop on the corner, right, opposite. Toward the center of the city, yes. Did you see the bags that he had in his hand when he went out? My wife's seen some of them. Let me show you some pictures and see if it looks like this. He points. This middle one, I know that ain't the type there. That's not the type. And he hands a picture to the witness. I'll show you a picture of a bag that's been marked as Commission's Exhibit number 126 and ask if the bag looks like that. And then that cuts off. So let me explain what's happening here, and I'm glad I'm seeing this. This is the first time I've actually seen this in particular. And this is the witness who saw when Oswald returns. Oswald allegedly goes to Mexico City, and Marina with Ruth Paine go back to Dallas, right? So he had come back to New Orleans in when was it? Was that May of 63? Yes, it was May of 63. You know why? Because it coincides with when Carrie Thornley allegedly had left, right? We're getting into that another time. But he comes back in May, and he leaves then again when he goes to Mexico City and then returns to Dallas allegedly after that. So that would be the end of September 25th. But here's the problem with that. The problem is that we have Carrie Thornley, or the person who allegedly rode the bus there, but I don't really know if that story's correct or not. I found a 300-page document on Howard Bowen, Albert Osborne, a.k.a. The guy who was allegedly on the bus with Oswald, right? But so this is happening on the it had to be the 24th, but it's not. See, this is another problem. This is the evening of the 25th, September the 25th. Okay? This is the problem with that. So Marina gets picked up on September the 24th. They go back to Dallas. He's there till the next day, September the 25th, right? But that's too little a time for him to make it to Mexico City in less than, 24 hours. So just for him the bus that needed to be taken in order to get to the border had to have left on the 24th, but he didn't leave on the 24th. He was still sitting there on the fucking front porch the 25th before he caught the bus with 2 handbags, right? So he didn't fucking go to Mexico City. We don't know what happens to this particular Oswald after this. Because on September 26th, which would be even the next day, he's still in fucking New Orleans, where he goes to the post office, closes the P.O. box, and leaves a forwarding address to the Paine residence. However, simultaneously, he is on the bus that's already crossed the border into Mexico, where he will arrive the next day, the 27th, at 10 o'clock in the morning. Okay? Oswald is still in New Orleans on the 26th, closing out his P.O. box. So, not Oswald in Mexico City. All right. So this witness here, Mr. Rogers, I'm going to have to add some of this to the update of my book that I'm doing, because I already have a section on this part, but I didn't have anything on Mr. Rogers. So this will have to be added to it. But yeah, that's the point of his testimony here. Next, we have an FBI document dated 3/2/64, Mrs. Ruth Paine, 2515 West 5th Street, Irving, Texas, was exhibited a motel registration card obtained from Mr. Mike Carrier, Rambler Motel, Wascom, Texas, identified as item DL-39. Mrs. Paine identified the handwriting on the above-described registration card as being her handwriting. She stated the car, license number NK4041 for the state of Texas, is the license number on her 1955 Chevrolet four-door, two-tone green station wagon. Well, it's blue and white, isn't it? Mrs. Paine described the motel, the name of which motel and the city in which located, she could not recall, as being located on the south side of the road shortly after leaving the state of Louisiana coming into Texas. Mrs. Paine stated that Marina Oswald was with her at the time she visited this motel on September 23, 1963, as indicated on the registration card, but that Marina Oswald stayed in the car while she, Mrs. Paine, registered. Mrs. Paine described the motel as a 10 to 15 unit motel, L-shaped, with one portion running north and south and the other running east from the south end of the first portion. She does not remember the color of the motel. Mrs. Paine stated she and Marina occupied a room in this motel near the middle section, which runs east from the south end of the portion that runs north and south. The entire motel is one story. She stated it was not a new motel and that the only parking was that in front of the entrance to the motel rooms. There was observed on the afternoon of February 28, 1964, parked at 2515 West 5th Street, Irving, Texas, which is the residence of Mrs. Ruth Paine, a 1955 Chevy four-door, two-tone green station wagon bearing 1963 Texas license NK4041, which automobile was identified by Mrs. Paine as belonging to her. All right. FBI document 2664 to SAC Dallas, Director FBI. Lee Harvey Oswald, Internal Security, R. Cuba. Re-telephone call from Mr. W.A. Brannigan, 2564, re-entry into Mrs. Paine's calendar. Enclosed is a Xerox of calendar. Also enclosed are 2 copies of photograph of Albert Osborne, a.k.a. John Howard Bowen, taken in connection with his application for Canadian passport at number 101063. Photos of calendar follow. So this is an interesting one. Oh, here's a note. Ruth Paine's calendar contained a notation on October 23rd. L.H. Oswald, purchase of rifle. D.L. was telephonically instructed, 2564, to immediately ascertain from Mrs. Paine significance of this. On 2664, D.L. requested they be furnished photo or Xerox of the calendar for their use in questioning Mrs. Paine. Photos of Osborne are being furnished for completion of D.L. file. So, at some point, she claims, when she's interviewed, and I believe we'll get to this, that after the assassination, for some reason, she wrote that on the calendar. But why she wrote that date, I don't know. Maybe she'll clarify. All right, just flipping through this. She only has one name written in it says remember children on their special days. And she has Lawrence John Hoke, H-O-K-E, born April 14th, 63. So I'm still looking for a pregnant woman who was seen at Ruth Paine's house the week of the assassination, who I believe is the same woman who met with Oswald in the theater. So, not this person's mother, but still looking. All right, then we have a full calendar, January to December. I'm not going to go through actually any of this. The miscellaneous notes here. She has some stuff about Lee, weird, interesting notes about Lee. Like when we get closer to his job, it's almost like these notes are like planted there on purpose. She was completely in on the setup. I mean, she knew that Marina was out with Carrie Thornley doing stuff at times when Oswald was supposed to be there, right? Like, she was a willing participant, maybe not the assassination, but in the maintenance and framing of Oswald for sure. So I guess she's asked about the child. So here's some testimony. Mrs. Paine. He was born last April 14th, 63, and I wrote it down. Mr. Jenner says, nothing to do with the Oswalds? She says no. The next sheet is blank, of course. Now, to the calendar itself, are there any entries in January that have reference to the Oswalds? None. February? Yes. Please pick them out according to dates. Well, you must understand that some of these were written at the time and some were put in later. All right, can you distinguish between them, please? I wrote down on February 15th, June's birthday, 9:55 a.m., Minsk. That was written in later. That is, she was born February 15th. Did you put the year in there? The year does not appear. I, of course, know it. And that was the previous year. She was born in 1962. 1962. Any other reference or entry in the month of February that has relation to the Oswalds? At the top is written Marina last period, February 5th, crossed out, and then in quotes, or 15th. This refers to menstrual period, trying to figure when the baby would be due, and it was an inaccurate notation I learned later. Then there is a note written at the time, the only one on this page that refers to the Oswalds, that was written at the time, that says Everett's, with a question mark. Entered where? On the 22nd of February, and from this. And you've already testified about that. From this, I deduced that was when I first met them. Now, I turn to March, and I direct your attention to the upper left-hand corner of that card, and it appears to me that in the upper left-hand corner are October 23rd, then a star, then LHO, followed by the words purchase of rifle. Would you explain those entries? This was written after. After? This was written, indeed, after the assassination. All right, I heard on the television that he had purchased a rifle. When? I heard it on November 23rd. Yes. And when back to the page for March to put a little star on March 20th as being a small square, I couldn't fit it in all I wanted to say. I just put it in a star and then referring to it in the corner of the calendar. That's to the entry I have read. Put the star saying LHO, purchase of rifle, then I thought someone is going to wonder about that. I'd better put down the date and did, but it was a busy day and one of the most busy in my life, and I was off by a month as to what day it was. That is, you made the entry in October. October 23 instead of November. It should have been November 23? It should have been November 23. And the entry of October 23 which should have been November 23, was an entry on your part indicating the date you wrote on the calendar, the star followed by LHO purchase of rifle, and likewise the date you made an entry. On the 20th. This is the square having the date March 20th. Yes, is that correct? I might point out that I didn't know Lee had a middle name until I had occasion to fill out forms for Marina in Parkland Hospital. That's when you learned his middle name was Harvey and his initial was H. Right. Any other entries in March relating to the Oswalds? Yes. Identify it, please, first as to date. And this written at the time, it happens to be also on March 20th. It says Marina, and I judged that this was the time we had scheduled for me to come to her, and I believe it is the date referred to in one of the letters as until the 20th. You've already testified about this incident. Yes. Any others? Not for the month of March. All right. Now, dropping down on that same page to the calendar for April, are there any entries relating to the Oswalds? Yes. Written at that time, there is an entry for Tuesday, April 2nd, Marina and Lee dinner, and it looks like 7 o'clock above the word dinner. That has been testified to. You've testified to that? Yes. Then there is an entrance on an entry? Yes, an entry, on April 8th, where Marina's name appears, this time written in Russian. And you've testified about that? Yes. And there's a similar entrance for the 10th of April, which, with an arrow. Entry, you mean again, right? I'm sorry, an entry, pushing it over to the 11th, which would indicate to me the actual meeting took place on the 11th. And you testified to that. Is that correct? Yes, I have. Then I've also testified about meeting, picnic, Marina and Lee on the 20th of April. All right. And then I've Also testified about seeing both of them on the 24th of April, and in that square on my calendar appeared the words Lee and Marina. Then there was an entry referring to the Oswalds. You mean theirs? Theirs, but written in later, saying Marina and Lee wedding anniversary 2 years ago. That is, you mean you didn't write it on the 30th of April. I wrote that later. I learned that the date sometime in the fall. You've now identified all entries on the April calendar referring to the Oswalds. Yes, I have. Let's take May. Well, I have referred to the fact that this entry on May 1st, Mary, refers to a babysitter, followed by War and Peace. This recalls me to the fact that Marina went with me, and we took June, and we saw the movie War and Peace, about which you've testified. Yes, the next entry. The next one is relating to the Oswalds. Right, it's on May 10th, going over to the 11th. We're in New Orleans, and it means these were days we were going to New Orleans. And have you testified about that and that event? I have. Any other entries on the May calendar relating to the Oswalds? No. Then we have a whole bunch of calendar pages that I can't really read much. The handwriting is kind of scribbly. It's got various birthdays and appointments and things of that nature. Calendar has indicated on the 19th of September it was Jewish New Year, and Yom Kippur on the 28th. What kind of calendar is this? It's a flower calendar. Then we have Lee's birthday indicated on the 18th of October. You see that indicator for the 23rd. Supposed to have Lee, bought a rifle, but I don't see that. All right. I don't really see anything of significance off these other pages here. A lot of appointments. All right. Next we have another email to probably John Armstrong. From Norman Hurst. It says Piper, Michael Collins Piper, features Frank Hauser in his books. Final Judgment, a book which Lancer refuses to sell along with John Judge. They stopped him doing a presentation in California. He's supposed to be an anti-Semitic, and his books also. The book is one I keep going back to Ed Sherry. Got a case full of them. Ask Ed to send you a copy, apart from one FBI doc. I have nothing else on Frank Hauser, although I do have a few pages on Dan Burroughs. Frank Hauser was with Burroughs when the poor guy committed suicide. Also, I believe a Washington-based researcher by the name of Michael Levy did some work on Frank Hauser. Have you spoken with Jerry Rose? He may have info on Frank Hauser. That's Frankhauser. It's an email from 2001. And the next one, have you read the report on Frank Hauser? He says that Ruth Paine was LHO's intelligence handling babysitter. I can't think of a better reason to discredit somebody. Can you? If anyone, including Piper, whoever he is unwilling or unable to look at both sides of the Frank Hauser story, then they are wearing blinders. Next email. Like you, one page told you read Piper. Frank Hauser worked for Phoebe's as a snitch. Told SSCI that he was threatened by them, FBI, during the Warren Commission. Warned not to mention anything about the Paines. Also, remember Burroughs' name in Lee Harvey Oswald's notebook. He's joined at the hip with Frank Hauser. All right. Next one says subject, no subject. Who wouldn't touch him with a barge pole? Do I understand that you do not have any documents on him? Then the next couple pages are seemingly pages from an address book. I can't tell if I don't think this is Oswald's handwriting. Next, we have a bunch of emails between Bob Skidmore to Tree Frog, whoever the hell that is. Subject, Ruth feels our pain. And he sends a link to the SB Times. Here's Bob, did you save this paper for me? And then the next email says, folks, Ruth Paine turns up in Tampa, St. Pete, and surprise, indicts the lone nut yet again. But surprise, she forgets to tell us about the paperclip guy her husband worked for. Guess the newspaper ran out of space. I don't wonder what he means by the paperclip guy. Next, we have Ricochet in Dallas by Dave Scheiber, Scheiber, dated 11/19/99. St. Petersburg Times, South Pinellas. It's probably an article. Let me give it a read. Most of the time, the thoughts linger just below the surface. She manages to keep them there, out of mind, until the next story about President John F. Kennedy or Lee Harvey Oswald hits the news. For Ruth Hyde Paine, the recollections are still tinged with regret and sorrow, still hard to discuss after so many years. With the opening of the major JFK exhibit nearby at the Florida International Museum and the approaching 36th anniversary on Monday of Kennedy's assassination, the 67-year-old St. Petersburg resident and retired educator has been reflecting more frequently on the tragedy and the events that pulled her directly into its midst as an innocent player. In the months before the shooting, November 21st, 1963, Paine unwittingly had become entangled in the deceit and dysfunction that linked Oswald and his new Russian wife, Marina. It was a relationship, Paine says, that left her forever changed and might have altered the course of history if only she could have known more about Oswald and known it sooner. Those thoughts come up, but I try to tell myself there's no point in pursuing that line of thinking. She says in her office at St. Petersburg Religious Society of Friends Meeting House, I do find it a strain to talk about it. Often I don't bring it up myself. There's still a sense of loss. It was the most grief I'd ever felt. In 1963, Paine was a 31-year-old mother of two little children living in Irving, Texas, separated from her husband. As a devoted Quaker, she wanted to reach out for the cause of peace and learn to speak Russian. As a caring person, she wanted to reach out and help a needy young mother, Marina, who could teach her the language in return. Looking back, though, Paine wishes she never met the Oswalds at a party in February that year. If their paths had not crossed, so much would have been different. She would never have offered comfort and assistance to Marina, isolated in her new home in Dallas with an odd, belligerent husband, able to speak only her native tongue, pregnant with the couple's second child, and without any solid means of support. She would never have driven Marina 500 miles to New Orleans in May, so the Oswalds could live together, or driven her back to Irving in September, so Marina could get proper medical care before having her baby. She would never have brought Marina, 21, into her home as a live-in guest during the 2 months leading to the assassination, never let Oswald, 25, stay there almost every weekend, help teach him to drive a car, let him watch football on her TV and play with her own two children. She would never, mainly as a favor to Marina, have made a call to the personnel director of the book depository, ultimately helping Oswald land his job there overlooking Dealey Plaza in downtown Dallas. She would never have had to deal with the most difficult memory of all, the garage. Inside the blanket, she recounts the story in solemn, soft tones, one that was thoroughly documented in the Warren Commission report, which relied on Paine's testimony more than that of any other private citizen. Her name appears more than 200 times. On Thursday, the night before the assassination, Oswald showed up unexpectedly at the Paine's house. He always spent the weekdays living in a boarding house in Dallas to be closer to work, and because Paine was not comfortable with him living in her home, it was a little two-bedroom place, and Oswald's his burly demeanor, was hard to take for long stretches. When he arrived at the house, Marina thought he had come to make amends for an argument they had over the phone several days earlier. Instead, Oswald went to bed early, around 9 p.m. Soon after, Paine noticed that a light had been left on in her garage. What she did not know, and Marina did, was that Oswald had for weeks kept a rifle bundled inside a blanket in the corner of the garage. What she did not know, and Marina did, is that Oswald had used it to try to shoot a retired Army general in Dallas barely 6 months before. Had she any inkling of that, Oswald would have been derailed and most likely forgotten in history as a political malcontent. But Marina, fearful of her husband, terrified by his warnings that she could be deported, kept that knowledge from her host. Friday afternoon, Paine heard the jolting news on her television that shots had been fired at the president outside the book depository. She looked for Marina. She was outside hanging up diapers, so I went out and told her that. The mention of the book depository gave Marina a sinking feeling. Paine learned later that Marina slipped into the garage, where she was relieved to see the rolled-up blanket in the corner. News followed that the president, a man Paine had voted for and deeply admired, was dead. Her horror intensified when police showed up at her house by mid-afternoon. They had Oswald in custody for allegedly killing a Dallas police officer who had stopped to question him near his boarding house. They wanted to know whether he had a gun in the house. They didn't have a warrant or anything, and everybody was just very tense and upset. When they asked me if he had a gun, I said no, but I translated the question to Marina, and she said yes, he did, and led the officers to the garage, showing the blanket roll. Paine watched as a police officer picked up the blanket roll. He pulled it over his arm, and Paine felt numb. It just hung there limply, she says quietly. There was nothing in it. Oswald had awakened early that morning, according to the Warren Commission report, retrieved the rifle from the garage, wrapped the disassembled gun in paper, and gone to work at the book depository. He had told the neighbor who drove him to the job from Irving each week that he was carrying curtain rods for his apartment. Even without a warrant, police took many items from Paine's garage, including her folk dance records that she needed to teach a class at a Quaker conference. They took her address book. Paine complained, but an officer grabbed her by the arm and insisted that she and Marina be taken downtown immediately for questioning. Marina wanted to change clothes, but one agitated policeman threatened to put both her children and Paine's in juvenile custody if there was any more delay. Paine was able to make arrangements for her 2-year-old son, Christopher, to stay with a neighbor. The other children, Paine's 4-year-old daughter, Sylvia, and Marina's 2 daughters, 1-month-old Audrey and 21-month-old June, went with their mothers to the station. Police took statements and provided a Russian translator for Marina. I was very happy about that because my capacity to think, much less translate, was not very good, Paine says. Marina returned to the Paine's home with Oswald's mother, Marguerite. On Saturday, she went again to police headquarters, fully expecting to come back to the Paine's house that day. She never did. Marina was sequestered by the police in protective custody, and Paine's repeated efforts to reach her were ignored by the Secret Service and people now advising Marina. In fact, Marina was told that her chances of remaining in the United States were better if she stayed away from the Paine family. The woman Ruth Paine had shared so much with for 2 months, child-rearing, meals, laughter, emotional support for their troubled marriages, was suddenly out of her life completely. She would see Marina again 4 months later, only briefly, and just 2 more times after that, the final visit in 1966. Things would never be the same. Their relationship was tainted by a betrayal of trust and overshadowed by the sadness and awkwardness they shared. It was shaken further by a revelation soon after the assassination. The note when Oswald was killed by Jack Ruby on Sunday, November 24th. Paine's world was thrown into even more turmoil. She watched her TV in shock as the man who had spent so much time at her home was gunned down. Before she knew it, Irving police blocked off her street. An officer then entered her house with a rifle and drew the blinds on her windows. Police had raced to Paine's house just in case her life might be in danger. Paine calmed down, and then her thoughts turned to how devastated Marina must be. Paine began sending Marina's possessions to her, from clothes to diapers, via an Irving policeman stationed in a patrol car in front of her house. One of the items was a Russian book about raising children. Paine had no idea it contained a hidden note Oswald had written to Marina. It detailed his plot to kill Major General Walker, with instructions on what Marina should do if he did not return. Okay, it's such nonsense. So much evidence planted after the fact, and I promise that fucking note doesn't even exist anymore, and all there is a photocopy. I guarantee. Marina had stashed the note in the book in case she ever needed to use it against her husband. 2 weeks after Paine sent the book to Marina, 2 Secret Service agents showed up at her door. One was Russian-born and seemed to be checking out Paine closely for any connection to the assassination. He showed her a piece of paper. It was Oswald's note. The agents wondered if she had tried to secretly send the book to Marina. They wanted to know how the note got in the book, she says. I told them I certainly did not know anything about it. The note was the first evidence to link Oswald to the attempted killing of Major General Walker. When confronted, Marina acknowledged putting the note in the book herself, and Paine was free of any suspicion. Paine would learn later that Oswald had gone to his hometown of New Orleans at Marina's urging to avoid detection for the shooting. Once again, Paine realized Marina had withheld vital information from her. Though that upset her, she found herself feeling sympathy for Marina. Most of my anger was focused on Lee, she says. I guess I still felt somewhat protective of Marina. I didn't want to focus on her failings because she was so vulnerable and afraid. Convincing evidence, Paine has given a great deal of thought over the years to Oswald's plot to kill Walker, and how he cased and photographed Walker's house while planning the murder. To her, it's proof that Oswald acted alone in Kennedy's assassination. He had shown he had the means and the desire to kill a public figure. In fact, Paine's chief motivation for talking publicly about her experience is to counter all the talk of JFK assassination conspiracies to which the public has increasingly ascribed over the years. There's a great deal of forgotten information about this fundamental part of the Warren Commission, and they were very aware that Oswald not only had a rifle he got by mail order, but he attempted to shoot somebody, she says. It's not touched on by the folks who are sure there was a plot. It doesn't fit with the conspiracy theory. To those who believe Ruby was acting on behalf of the mob to silence Oswald, Paine sides with a less popular theory, that Ruby was grief-stricken by Kennedy's death and determined to prevent national trauma of a prolonged Oswald trial, which he believed would have forced Jackie Kennedy to return to Dallas and to testify. In retrospect, Paine thinks Oswald was capable of planning and carrying out the assassination alone. In her view, he was far too much of a loner, far too combative and paranoid to have taken orders from or worked with anyone else in a plot. From the first time she saw him at that party, she was struck by how disgruntled he seemed, disenchanted by both the United States and the Soviet Union. Later, she observed that if people disagreed with him, he took it as criticism and lashed back. Oswald was always a brooding presence. When he stayed at the Paine's house with Marina on weekends, he would leave each Monday from Irving to work at the book depository, live during the week at his Dallas boarding house, then return to the Paines on Friday evening. 2 weeks before the assassination, Oswald had spent a 3-day weekend at the house because of Veterans Day. It was a stressful visit and potentially significant. Paine remembers walking by a desk where Oswald was typing a letter. He hunched over the typewriter to prevent her from seeing anything as she walked by, but he accidentally left the handwritten draft on the desk, and Paine found it a day later. It rambled on about the FBI no longer being interested in him and Marina, and it struck her as bizarre. The FBI was indeed interested in Oswald. It was making regular checks at the Paine's house to look in on him. She tucked the letter away and planned to give it to federal agents during their next visit. Quote, I thought, well, when they come back, I'll ask them what they think this is about. But the FBI did not come back. The next weekend, Paine was having a birthday party for Sylvia, who was turning 4. Marina felt her husband's presence might put a damper on the celebration, so she asked him to stay in Dallas. As the weekend wound to a close, Marina missed Oswald and tried to reach him at a number he had left, only to be told that nobody by that name lived there. A day later, November 18th, Oswald called and yelled at Marina over the phone, claiming he was using an alias. They argued, and Paine says Marina worried that Oswald was immersed in fantasies over being an important person and engaged in mysterious pursuits. 4 days later, Thursday, November 21st, Oswald showed up unannounced. Friday morning, November 22nd, he awoke early at Paine's house, took a package from the garage, and quietly caught his ride to the book depository. Total nonsense. You Are Different, Ruth Paine and Marina Oswald were treated with respect in 1964 by the Warren Commission, which was completely satisfied that neither had any advanced knowledge of Oswald's plans. Marina eventually married a Texan and settled outside of Dallas and changed her name. She grew convinced that Oswald did not kill Kennedy. Paine got a divorce from her husband and immersed herself in social causes and education, CIA, with experience running an interracial Montessori school. Paine eventually became principal of a Quaker school in Philadelphia. But Paine's daughter suffered severe headaches from a chronic sinus condition and needed to be in a different climate. So Paine took sailing lessons, bought a 28-foot sloop, and quit her job. She and her 2 teenage children embarked on an adventure. They sailed for 3 months, starting in Chesapeake Bay, traversing intercoastal waterways until they ended their voyage at St. Pete's Vinoy Basin. The Paines liked the area and decided to make it their new home. Paine entered the University of South Florida, earning a degree as a social psychologist. She went on to work for the school system in North Florida's Franklin County. In 1987, she returned to Pinellas County to be with a boyfriend and eventually spent 4 years doing psychological testing in the Hillsborough County school system. Paine retired in 1996 and spends many hours working for Pro-Nica, a project of regional Quaker organizations to assist Nicaraguan development. And the rest of it just fluffs Ruth Paine, so I'm not going to fucking read it here. She's a lying cunt to the end. Like, she's still fucking alive, and she knows Carrie Thornley. She knows about the relationship there. She knows all kinds of stuff she's not saying. She knows Oswald had nothing to fucking do with nothing. That he was adult. So that's what we're going to call it for today, guys. I will be back tomorrow with more. So I'll see you guys then. Thank you.